Radhe Radhe. Today is Saturday, 18th July 2026, and here we are to present to you this recap video for today's Bhagavad Gita study session. As you said in the session, it's just me, of course, but we'll plow through and take a quick view of everything that was covered today. So I'll bring up the slides and we'll see the cover slide. The content covered was after the usual recap quiz. That was last time, a few weeks ago, chapter 13, verses 29 and 30. Today we covered chapter 13, verses 31, 32, and 33. As always, if you take a look at the description for this video, you'll get some useful links for your reference. One, of course, being the link to the free community portal page where you can get all these slides, especially, for instance, the quiz questions, and then so much more for your learning material reference and recap videos and so on. With that, let us take a look at the first of today's verses, chapter 13, verse 31. यदा भूतपृथग्भावम् एकस्थम् अनुपश्यति तत एव च विस्तारम् ब्रह्म सम्पद्यते तदा. So chapter 13, verse 31 has the catchphrase with alliteration as derivation of diversity. As we had seen in the session, this is talking about the origin or the source of diversity. And as Sri Krishna says in this verse, and then Swamiji in the commentary, we see that we're trying to understand so that we can attain the realization of Brahman. We're trying to truly understand what we need to see. And that seeing is that there is diverse variety in all living beings around us, yet they're all situated in the same material nature and they're all born from it. So going back to the source, and as we saw in the session as well, Swamiji mentions root several times. So the analogy Swamiji gives, is about the ocean. We've seen ocean and the waves aspect several times in prior verses and analogies. Today, as we said, we talked about Swamiji mentioning the waves and froth and tides and ripples as a few additional examples of how that water from the ocean manifests. So if you imagine a little child, perhaps, right, for the first time you take them to the beach or the ocean, they might get very, very surprised seeing these different aspects. They see waves, they may see a low tide, maybe they see high tide from far. You take pebbles or stones and you toss them into any body of water, you'll see ripples. So there's all these different aspects, and we think, oh, wow, all these are totally different. They are unique. However, when we totally understand that, oh, yes, it's coming from that same body of water, could be the ocean, a lake, a river, wherever, all that is to stress on the uniqueness of the source and that inherent unity that exists in all of them. So Swamiji gives another example, the entire gamut or spectrum of beings, the tiniest amoeba we've seen in science or biology, all the way to the largest or most powerful of the celestial gods. As we said in the session, doesn't matter what size they have or qualities, doesn't matter which loka they are in or where they are in terms of any hierarchy. All these emanate from, of course, that same source. And that source, in two steps, Swamiji tells us, everyone has that embodiment. So the body, the vehicle, it's coming as a creation of material nature, material energy. And then, of course, what is inside each of them, we have seen, and that's one of the crux elements of chapter 13, the knower of that field, right? The knower of the body, that is the soul. So there is a soul in each of these bodies, and that soul is a divine fragment of the Supreme Soul. So everything, of course, is rooted, as Swamiji says, in that same material nature. And in fact, even further, they're all emanating from that energy of God. So this realization of Brahman can come about, Sri Krishna says, if we see all this as emanating from that one source. If we take a look at, let's say, Sanskrit words first, so let's again, we covered in the session, let's add to our dictionaries prithak bhavam. This variety we're talking about, this diverse variety, is prithak bhavam. And then what are we trying to attain? we're trying to attain that realization of Brahman. Let's also look at Sampadyate. Sampadyate, they attain. Now, in English, we also covered a word we've seen before, that is substratum. Substratum pervading all existence, spiritual substratum. So we mentioned that this is the underlying principle or the underlying foundation of something. So as Swamiji here says, an understanding of material nature being the energy of God is that same spiritual substratum we're trying to see, which is pervading all of existence. So that is chapter 13, verse 31. Let's take a look at chapter 13, verse 32. Anaditwan nirgunatvat paramatmayam avyayah sharirasthopi kaunteya nakaroti na lipyate. Here, the catchphrase we saw as a question is best supporting actor. I know we talked at length in the session. It's something for you to ponder about word by word and as an entire phrase. It's, of course, talking about the Supreme Soul, this specific verse. And yes, indeed, the Supreme Soul is the best. Is the Supreme Soul supporting? Yes and no, two ways. Supporting, yes, because God is always supporting us. He is, in fact, that literal and figurative support of each of us. On the other hand, does he play a subsidiary role in the world, in our lives? No, he's actually the lead. So there's that ironic contrast there. And then, of course, actor. In this verse, we have seen that God does not act. So he's not an actor there. So on one hand, he is not the best supporting actor. On the other hand, because he is the supreme, he is the best and ultimate, he is the support of all of us. And many times, as you've noticed in a movie or film, years later, you might still remember a side non-lead character who actually, let's say, they say, stole the show and got that best supporting actor or actress award. In that sense, here, of course, as that ultimate support for all of us, even from afar, even from within, best supporting actor. Again, the question for each of you to ponder about for the catchphrase. So as you see here, the Supreme Soul, we get a reminder we've learned long back. It is imperishable, it is without beginning, and it's devoid of any material qualities. Yet within us, situated within each of us, it neither acts, Sri Krishna says, nor is it tainted by material energy. We've seen these concepts several times before. Again, Paramatma, situated or dwelling inside each of us, he's there. Remember the Mundaka Upanishad, the analogy of the two birds on a tree. The bird, so-called higher up, is God watching, witnessing as an observer. The bird lower down, each of us as a soul, enjoying the literal and figurative fruits of material nature with our eyes or backs turned away from the Supreme Soul, from God. And the impact is on us. The impact is not on the Supreme Soul. So the Supreme Soul isn't tainted by material energy, as Sri Krishna says here. So all this presence in the body is definitely there, yet the Supreme Soul doesn't get subject to the law of karma or the cycle of birth and death. These are experienced by the soul, and we'll see in the next verse something additional. But yeah, the Supreme Soul, unaffected. Remember, God is complete, independent. We've seen the completeness mantra several times. And so here, there's no impact, tainting, or corruption on the Supreme Soul. If you recall, we covered three connections for all of you to note. So, chapter 2, verse 24. If you look at this, chapter 2, verse 24 here, the second half of the shloka is talking about the soul. It is everlasting, in all places, unalterable, immutable, and primordial. So we get a reminder of things we've seen long ago that are now being used to also describe the Supreme Soul. So avyayam, everlasting, imperishable, unalterable, unchangeable, immutable, and primordial from the very beginning. So that's chapter 2, verse 24. The other thing that I'll play for all of you, we did in class as well, is let's just have a cameo from Mummy, and I want to connect us to this cycle of birth and death and not being subject to the law of karma. So just for a minute and a half, let's go back to the Ramcharitmanas, the Ramayana, and we'll hear this. I'll translate briefly later.
दोनों हाथ जोड़कर माता कहने लगी, हे अनंत, मैं किस प्रकार तुम्हारी स्तुति करूं? वेद और पुराण तुमको माया, गुण और ज्ञान से परे और परिमाण रहित बतलाते हैं। श्रुतियां और संत जन दया और सुख का समुद्र, सब गुणों का धाम कहकर जिनका गान करते हैं, वही भक्तों पर प्रेम करने वाले लक्ष्मीपति भगवान मेरे कल्याण के लिए प्रकट हुए हैं। वेद कहते हैं कि तुम्हारे प्रत्येक रोम में माया के रचे हुए अनेकों ब्रह्मांडों के समूह हैं। वे तुम मेरे गर्भ में रहे। इस हंसी की बात के सुनने पर धीर पुरुषों की बुद्धि भी स्थिर नहीं रहती। जब माता को ज्ञान उत्पन्न हुआ तब प्रभु मुस्कुराए। वे बहुत प्रकार के चरित्र करना चाहते हैं, अतः उन्होंने सुंदर कथा कहकर माता को समझाया, जिससे उन्हें पुत्र का प्रेम प्राप्त हो। माता की वह बुद्धि बदल गई। तब वह फिर बोली, हे तात, यह रूप छोड़कर अत्यंत प्रिय बाल लीला करो। यह सुख परम अनुपम होगा मेरे लिए। माता का यह वचन सुनकर देवताओं के स्वामी सुजान भगवान ने बालक रूप लेकर रोना शुरू कर दिया। तुलसीदास जी कहते हैं, जो इस चरित्र का गान करते हैं वे श्री हरि का पद पाते हैं और फिर संसार रूपी कूप में नहीं गिरते। ब्राह्मण, गौ, देवता और संतों के लिए भगवान ने मनुष्य का अवतार लिया। वे माया और उसके गुण और इंद्रियों से परे हैं। उनका दिव्य शरीर अपनी इच्छा से ही बना है, किसी कर्म बंधन से परवश होकर त्रिगुणात्मक भौतिक पदार्थों के द्वारा नहीं।
So if you recall, we had discussed this thing again. So I'll just briefly translate. Remember, this is Ram Navami, the birth of Lord Ram. Mother Kaushalya absolutely, stunned and surprised. He's standing in front of her in that four-armed Vishnu form. She's wondering that, oh wait, all the world's energy, Maya, etc., he's distant from them, yet they all emanate from him. How was he in her womb for all these months? She's confused, and of course, she, pleads for the Leela of having that motherly enjoyment of seeing her baby child being born. So Lord Ram, does acknowledge that yes, this is a Leela, and as a conversion to the baby form, then laughs. So he does that first, in fact, cries, laughs, like, does all of that for the first time. And then Tulsi Das ji in the Ramcharit Manas is quoting that God doesn't descend because we make that happen. He descends by his own choice. He has a divine birth. He has a divine body. He doesn't come because of any bondage, any law of karma, any cycle of birth and death. So all that is something you might want to connect to here. As we had said as well, every time Ram Navami, Janmashtami, the birth of Lord Krishna, we see these concepts over and over again. Swamiji talks about them, and this is directly chapter 13, verse 32. Last connection, let's not forget, is the flyer as well we saw over here. We have this person, we have, the Supreme Soul visible, we have some, border as we had mentioned, and then some clapboards, symbols of energy. And the question is, which irony of our limited film of life energizes us? As we said, couple of words, pun intended here. So, film of life, film is to do again with acting. The Supreme Soul doesn't act. We act, even the soul, in fact, doesn't act, but we act. That's again through the material nature, through the three gunas. And ironically, of course, we know it's limited. The Supreme Soul, of course, is unlimited, imperishable. Even we as souls are unlimited, imperishable. The body, of course, has a limited lifespan. What energizes us is the Supreme Soul, of course, from within, Paramatma. And as you see, this is that actually protective border over here. You see all these clapboards, all these films, actions that are trying to, with energy, if you look at the symbols, they're all trying to get past that border to the Supreme Soul. But as you can see, the Supreme Soul doesn't act, doesn't take on to these films, these clapboards. The Supreme Soul doesn't get tainted or corrupted by material energy. We do as people in this body form, ironically, but within us, all that happening, it doesn't impact the soul, the supreme soul at all. We'll see next, in fact, the soul as well. So that's the connection with the flyer for this verse. Finally, let us look at chapter 13, verse 33. Yatha sarvagatam sokshmyad akasham nopalipyate sarvatravasthito dehe tathatmanopalipyate. So, chapter 13, verse 33 has the catchphrase here as a question, and it is contaminated consciousness. More straightforward. We also know the answer, and we have learned today, of course, that the body, of course, can be tainted, can be contaminated, but the consciousness, the soul that provides it, will not. It does not get bothered or impacted by all those attributes of the body. Sri Krishna gives this as an analogy of space. Space holds everything within it, but space is subtle. He mentions that. And so space doesn't get contaminated by whatever it holds, whatever is within space. Similarly, the soul, because it is subtle, it pervades the entire body, it provides consciousness throughout it, but it does not get affected by the attributes of the body. So Swamiji talks about the soul, experiencing sleep, waking, tiredness, refreshment, all that. Remember, we had the recap quiz question as well, the illusion of doership. It's because the ego misidentifies, it identifies incorrectly with the body and not with or as the soul. And so Swamiji poses a question: why do changes in the body not taint the soul? Remember, the soul is within us. Well, again, that's because Sri Krishna directly states it. So it's the word of the Lord. The soul is subtle and it is beyond the three gunas, it is beyond material nature. Remember, it's a divine energy based fragment of the Supreme Soul, a fragment of God. So the body can be doing anything, the soul retains its divinity, and that divinity continues. We mentioned, right, that holding pattern after death, the soul, it can take some time, long, short, eventually moves on to another suitable womb, as we have learned. And that again, all throughout, there's no contamination of the soul. That's why if you often, we've said, often you've heard the phrase pure soul. It's typically used for, babies or children. Ironically, it can and should be used for all of us as well. We all are pure souls. Many times we just don't recognize that, and that's because of this attachment to the world and misidentification as the body, not as the soul. But nevertheless, it's something for all of us to keep thinking about how to increase our evolution towards that divinity as we progress on our spiritual journeys. So that gets us towards the end of today's recap. As I'd mentioned in the session towards the end, so when we meet next time, that'll be to cover the last couple of verses of chapter 13. And then the following week, we'll, of course, have a full recap, full chapter quiz, in fact. So get your, studies going early if you can. Start reviewing all the prior chapter 13 verses. Eventually, we'll cover all 35 of them in that big chapter quiz. So we look forward to meeting you next time. That's Saturday, 25th July, 2026. Same 8 a.m. Central Time, 6:30 p.m. India time. Till then, thank you so much. Radhe Radhe.